You know, I'm kind of from the '60s, so I'm kind of a movement person in that cycle. And sometimes, you know, every generation seems like it seems less conscious in a lot of issues. But a few years ago, when I experienced the Enero Zapatista show at the center, this must have been like 4 years ago, I think. I was completely amazed that there was like 300 people there, all these young people. They were all very aware of issues, and this is just like, oh, now I can go and die, you know, because there's all this, and it was so like a reawakening and reaffirmation that there is young people that you know, are conscious, you know. So I really try to make an effort. Dealing with those issues with my students also down in the South Bay. And this was kind of a funny period because my session ended in December, and I knew that we weren't going to have that much time to work before the 28th, 27th, 28th. So I started working with my students on this whole thing of Zapatismo and just even Emiliano Zapata. Today was my first day back, and for some of my new students, I wanted to see where they were at. It's very disappointing to even know that even 50 to 60% of my students live or went to school in Tijuana. They don't know who Emiliano Zapata was and what he stood for, what you know. And so again, you know, I'm always watching out for the next generation. So we have been doing, in my classroom, it's a visual arts, primarily project-oriented, on-hands project. We've been doing images on the current Chiapas Zapatistas movement. And so currently we have that up on an exhibition. It is kind of a spiritual feeling about this Emiliano Zapata. And talking to some Indian people from Michoacan and in Tijuana this past week, it reawoke to me what still exists in Mexico, and still, you know, like everything from the horse, you know, like this one guy said that Emiliano Zapata could go into a bunch of wild horses and just stand, not just like a horse whisperer, but would stand next to the horse and touch it and then just look at it, and that the horse would be like calm, and he had something that the people really respected. And his whole attitude about the earth and about who worked it was not just a statement. It was something that it was really part of him. And when I was talking to these guys from Michoacan and from the southern part of Mexico, they kept on telling me about, oh, Cuauhtémoc. They always knew that Cuauhtémoc was part of them, that he inherited part of the last Aztec king. And in fact, one guy told me that Victoriano Huerta actually burned his feet like Cuauhtémoc, and says, keep him in there till he screams or he dies. And they put his feet in there, and he didn't scream, he didn't die. A curandera fixed up his feet so he could walk again, and that Quetzalcóatl also protected him, and people, that he grew up with that. He was surrounded by curanderos that knew that and gave him some guidance in that area. So like I said, this kind of reawoke to me that there's still that feeling. And a lot of federales, when they would supposedly see that horse, his horse, it was like the fear of hell came into them, because it was really strong, and people really, I'm telling you, this is like, what, 1920s, you know, here we are, it's like 100 years, you know, and still people know that. And, you know, some of the other things that in working with students and researching that whole thing about him being an Afro-Indio, which a lot of people don't speak of, that was part African and Indian. And I was researching some photographs this last year. That seems very interesting to me, and I think what our knowledge and the importance of what people know about this and why, the Chiapanecos did adopt that his name, and that was very important. I was in Chiapas 3 times before the '94, and I went with some anthropologists from Mexico City, and lived in some pueblos in Chiapas. And as a Ladino, as they were calling me a Ladino, which means that I'm a half-breed or a mestizo, the way the Indian people were treated in Chiapas was firsthand with me, and the racism of some of these Mexicans that are a little bit more light-skinned, and they take on all these Western flares, and it was terrible the way they treated them, and they were still walking around barefoot. They were still, even in church, it was very interesting. The Indians had their just logs on the side of the church. They couldn't even see into the altar. They had to look on the side door of the church to listen to the priest. And the Ladinos, as they call themselves, they could go into the main part of the church. Just things like that continuously. And it's given me this attitude that I think it's still alive, and then when I see the young people participate in this, and not just in San Diego, now I understand it's in different parts of California and other places, that Enero Zapatista is getting more importance, and I think people are reawakening to that, or I get the sense of that the spirit is still with us. It's within us, even though we're getting more and more ignorant of it each generation, especially in the United States. We get cut off from our language, from our customs, from all of those things, that it still, amazingly still prevails. I just recently restored the Mexican Revolution mural in Chicano Park, probably 4 or 5 months ago. And I did that originally airbrushed. I actually, in 1981, I went to the Fototeca Nacional de Pachuca, the National Photo Archives of Mexico. And I'm a photographer. I develop and do, use enlargers and stuff, the old school way. And so I went down there with some museum paper and large format, and I went to the archives, and I stayed there for over a week in the dark room. From 3 million glass negatives that they had stored there, went through those and picked something like 65 images, and that would have relevance to Chicanos, because there's a lot of things, like the United States had their first amphibious military action to Veracruz, where they killed all these people and all these Mexicans in Veracruz, to different things from the Hermanos Flores Magón that lived here in Tijuana, Los Angeles, and the border during that time. Images that I thought that Chicanos would understand about the revolution, that they could see parallels and things like that. So I brought that exhibit with me, and then we thought at the Centro Cultural to parallel it with something in the community, because the center's in Balboa Park, and you still want to get some kind of connection to the communities. So I thought, I should do a mural and dedicate it during the same month as the exhibition. So I worked on this pillar, and that's 1981, and put the show up and worked on this mural, and I did it all in sepia tones and airbrushes. I actually used the air gun on the whole mural to make it look like the old-fashioned photographs. And I did it partly with any budget, but this time I had a budget and I restored it with the best materials possible, giving it coatings and everything for hopefully at least a 50-year durability. But again, this spiritual thing, and it's, maybe I'm just getting older and I'm sensing things in a different way, but as the images were fading, and here I am redoing with the best airbrushes. Now I have the best airbrushes, the best paints, and that these ghost-like images that were coming into life, they actually looked like I was working with dead people, and they were coming to life. And it was like, it wasn't like a scary thing to me, but I think that I definitely sensed that revolution, even though they're coming in their horses to the AF, they're riding with Villa and Zapata, these faces that you might think that they were unknown start coming to life, and it just it was really interesting. Then my friend Ernesto Bustillos from Unión del Barrio passed away that same week that I'm working on it, and I decided to paint him right along with that group of people that were riding into Mexico City on horseback in amongst the crowd of people. And we actually had not only Day of the Dead, but we actually had a dedication to Ernesto, because he was definitely a guerrillero, a warrior in contemporary times. That even brought it into more contemporary times, and the mural in itself has Emiliano Zapata looking to the land of Chicano Park, and that, Chicano Park per se is taking over the land back to the community. It's as exactly what he stood for, and to me it makes so much sense that I did that mural. I think the other sidebar to it is that I also felt that the importance of women in the revolution, and in all revolutions, always seems to get overlooked. So I really made an effort to balance the mural with not only men in the revolution, but also women. And not only the wife of Pancho Villa is in there, a general, there was a woman that she used to disguise herself as a guy to command her troops. Just tried to bring that to the forefront, that women were very instrumental in the whole thing of not only that revolution, but all revolutions. One of our top issues of contemporary Chicano and Chicano communities is gentrification, and the way our communities just always get swallowed up by developers and commercial entities. And so they just, Logan Heights, you might think is a strong community, but at the same time, every lot, every piece of spare lot is bought up by this whole thing, from the ballpark to the convention center. It's just like a big steamroller, just rolling through and squeezing out the community. And I see that for the future, and as something that's going to be a constant struggle. And then there's all these other issues. Immigration is an issue. I think that it gets, you can use Arizona as an example, but we have the same issues here. Racism, the fact that Zapata was an Afro-Indio and indigenous person and believed in pre-Columbian thought, and it's something that we seem to lose really easily, and working with students is a constant thing. You have to supply the information, and I'm not sure if people all the reading and that kind of thing is the future. You know, I see libraries getting more digital, more cyber. That you know, my students say, well, let's Google it, so that if you can Google this information, you're gonna find out the truth or the information. You know, I think you know, that's why one of the reasons I paint murals, because I think that's going to be some way the community's going to learn some of these issues, you know, and keep that on the fire. You know, there's just the pride of who you are, and just to be indigenous of Mexico. If you're dark, or is there any awareness? You know, a lot of my kids go, well, I'm from TJ. So what does that mean? They say, well, where's your parent? Well, my parents were from Michoacan, but what does that mean? And I have their parents there, and they don't even know. They go, well, I'm from Tepic, so are you Huichol? And then, no, people are from the Sierra are Huichol, but I live in the city. But they're Huichol, but they, you know, they're already discriminated amongst them. They have actually, this one lady has family that lives a couple of miles into the mountains, and she says that she's Indian and she's not, and they're the same family. And I'm going, you know, just even something as simple as that, who you are. I know that I had this curiosity since I was a young guy, and I kept on asking that. Everybody said, why do you keep on asking us this? Because they say, oh, you're light skinned, so you have this German grandfather, you have this French grandfather. But I kept on saying, well, who's Indian? You know, then I see pictures of, finally met my great grandmother, who's Zapoteca, 4 feet tall, spoke Zapoteca, looked Zapoteca, little braids, Zapotecan braids. Oh, she's Zapoteca, so I must be part Zapoteca. And then finally, when I took my dad to Sonora, he's Yaqui. Actually, when we got there, he started speaking Papago and some other dialect. I said, Dad, I keep on asking you. You never told me that you spoke these other languages. And you know, it's really interesting that after 500 years of racism and oppression, that people, you know, have lost that knowledge, that information, you know. And so I'm in a constant search, from foods to customs to how people think, you know, the matriarchal system of families. And there's so many things that still take us to those original things. Aztec dancers supply a lot of information and tradition. So in school, I try to do, you know, bring some of those things, and you know, even, you know, to color, pigment their flesh tones. You know, how to make a flesh tone. You know, we all have primary colors. You know, as light as you can get, or as dark, you still have yellow, red, and blue. So it seems like everything that I do has some ties with bringing back some of that information in a visual arts form. As it's going on 42 years, it's a takeover of the park. You know, not only does it supply information to future generations, because I've seen, you know, big marches converge to the park, and that's always an amazing thing to me, because there's some feeling that transfers over. And you could see that in the crowds, even if they're not from that community, they come over and they meet there. That's really amazing. You know, you have to see it, and to really get the magnitude of that. But then, like during Day of the Dead, for instance, you know, I sit and I sort of meditate and see how different people do their altars and that, and then the pillars themselves look like large tombstones or something to me. And again, it brings, it has that kind of a feeling, and not exactly knowing what the spiritual energy is, but I think that it has become kind of a spiritual center for us. And the kiosco, which I worked on the design, the pre-Columbian motif and design of the structure, I think in itself, in the ceremonies and weddings and deaths and different things that have been celebrated there, has made it into a place of ceremony. And I think that that's very important for us. In this past couple of years, since I've been up on the scaffolding every day, just about, seeing the amount of international documenters of people, tourists, coming in with video cameras, and from, Japan to, Norway to almost every country in the world I've seen this past couple of years come through it. And then publications and awards. We just got a national historical. I was skeptical of acquiring that national category of historical site, is that the government might control what we would do there in the future. I know that some Native Americans told me that happened at the Rainbow Mountain, the Rainbow Bridge site, and they made it into that National Historical Site, and they couldn't do their ceremonies there anymore. And I thought that was just like, oh, what the hell, But I think Josie Talamantes and other people that have been working on that have made sure that we can continue without bureaucratic red tape to continue doing things. And I really feel that the future is promising for us. I think the new materials that we're using, this acryloid B72 that were been sealing all the work, and is as the best durability possible for that high exposure. I think that that's going to be setting this up at least for the next couple of hundred years. The exhibition per se brings out a lot of different contemporary things that are going on in Chiapas, in particular, arts and crafts and music, the schools that are going on there, and some of the current government. We just had a change of government. It's going to be pretty interesting to see the amount of changes. I know some of our local people, Peter Brown is down there now, and we have a direct contact constantly down there. That art, in a certain way, the way we can transfer it does bring not only the issues, but can be part of the solution. If we get reawakened by this, I think we will be part of that solution, not only here, but in Chiapas or wherever in Latin America, that you see this, that you see the native peoples getting together, organizing. I just saw some of them organizing against narcotraficantes. It was amazing to see that. They actually armed themselves and went to it. They took it on themselves, and they solved the issue. So I think, power to this show, and power to getting it and using almost this art as a weapon to solve some of these things. So thank you all for coming to the show, and I'm looking forward to the next 8 or 9 more years at least. Let's keep it up. Enero Zapatista, por siempre, ahora, mañana, and let's go for it.